Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com and I'm here today with another new product announcement video. This time we have a bunch of new 1/6 scale EastCoastArmory.com parts for the German Tiger 1. All of the items that are mentioned in this video are listed on the EastCoastArmory.com 1/6 scale Tiger 1 catalog page, and the direct link for the items can be found in the video description listed below. All of the items in this video were designed by request, and this is something that I frequently mention in these videos, but if you are working on a project and you do not see the detail component that you need listed on the EastCoastArmory.com website, don't be afraid to send me an email, because most times I could go ahead and design the component and have it listed as a general release item. If you want to reach out to me, I can be reached via the email address listed below, which is info@EastCoastArmory.com. The next new German tank part takes us to the Tiger 1. And here we have the new ECA early production Tiger 1 track removal cable storage set. This is something that I've been wanting to do for some time and finally got around to doing it. In the past, I've offered, specifically when I was working on the King Tiger, I designed and I offer on the ECA catalog the King Tiger / late production Tiger side hull track removal cable clamp set, and this one here is for the early production Tiger variant. There are some subtle differences between the two, but basically the set that we have here would be found on the early production Tigers. One was the Feifel systems and stuff along those lines. The set is all made from 3D printed components, and it does have several bits of metal hardware to accompany it. What you see here on the table is enough to outfit one early production Tiger 1, but there's also several other components that are on here as duplicates for the unlikely event that a mishap were to happen. If you do have that situation occur, well, you do have some extra components on hand to take care of any sort of replacement if necessary. In addition to this set here, I also went ahead and revisited the top main tow cable clamp set, and this is something that was also on the ECA catalog for some time. It was originally made out of cast resin with some metal bits to go along with it. That set now has finally been put out the pasture and retired with a new generation 3D printed set. I designed both of these sets in conjunction with one another. I'm going to go ahead and roll in some pictures of the top cable set so you get an idea on what the parts will look like. I do not have a set on hand at the moment. However, that first opportunity I do have one, I'll be able to make a video like this one over here, and I could show the actual production parts in person. Back to the parts that we have here. These are again made out of the 3D printed material, and if anyone is interested, I can also look into having these made out of 3D printed brass, but obviously that's something that is going to cost significantly more compared to the polymer versions that you see here. However, if that is something that floats your boat, feel free to hit me up on the ECA email address, info@EastCoastArmory.com, as again, I'm always open to taking on requests. What do we have here on the table? Well, let's go ahead and look at some of the parts in greater depth. Let's start first with the clamps, or I should say the U-straps. So these pieces are actually the same ones found on the later production Tiger sets, and we're just copy and pasted onto this set over here. They consist of a U-strap that is welded to the side of the vehicle, and the weld detailing and the geometry are all present. With the way the unit is designed, you drill a hole into the model, and then you just go ahead and simply glue this fella into the appropriate location. And once the glue's set, it's actually, in my experience, enough to keep the thing at bay. If you want, you can also add a piece of material on the opposite end to sandwich it in if need be, but from my experience, I never really had that problem. In addition to the U-shackles, we also have here the actual cleat itself. The piece is nothing more than an angle piece of steel with a large steel rod essentially just welded on. Again, all those details are again present, including the welds. The way this works is you have this section here, which would connect to the eye of the cable, and when it's pinned in place, that guy just gets slipped into this area like so, and that's how the tow cable, or the track removal cable, is actually fastened in place. As for securing this to the tow eye itself, well, that is done with this little pin that we have right here. It just locks it in, and then on the reverse end we have a nut that you see right here, and this gets slipped on over there. Once the glue set, the piece is attached. You'll notice there are 3 of these. Obviously 2 are going to be utilized for the build. The real big difference between the early production and the late production is with the number of these type of cleats, as well as also with the straps. On the later production unit, they had the adjustable cleat where it was, you get one of these type of units and the other one was actually on this track and it slides up and down, and when you fasten in place it adds the tension to the cable. It's actually a pretty slick system. In fact, it was a better design, which is, spoiler alert, why the Germans went with it. However, for the early production units, rather than doing that, we have this very elaborate, like, snaking type setup on how that track gets fitted in place. If anyone's seen my 1/16 scale videos, you know what I'm talking about. In fact, I'll just go ahead and throw a picture on screen of what the unit looks like so you get an idea. But as for how it's strapped to the vehicle, that is done with these clamps that we have here. So these clamps are located on several sections on the side of the armor plate of the Tiger I. And if you look at it, you'll see that it is actually hinged and it's held in place with a wing nut, or as I've seen on the Bovington Tiger, a metal fastener, i.e. a nut. And on the ECA set, the way this is designed is that the piece is hinged, and then it's held in place with a metal M3 2.5, or I'm sorry, an M2.5 fastener. You would actually slide this from the inside of the vehicle so it protrudes outward like that, and then you could clasp it in place with a metal nut. The reason why I went with this design is because this ensures that the parts that are taking stress are on metal as opposed to being just on the printed material, and it gives you much more strength that way. However, you have the outer casing here that is the appropriate detailing, so it's, again, you're having your cake and eating it too. Back to the clamp design, you'll notice that there are these 2 half cutout sections on the section. This is just to guide the cable in place, and these were lifted directly from the Bovington Tiger that obviously I was using for reference. On this side over here, the unit would actually have a piece that was an eyelet, and it would hinge downward, and that's how you would take the thing apart. Obviously, with the way I mentioned how it worked, you're not going to be able to get it to hinge. However, if you look at the piece, you'll have the illusion that the piece is an eyelet, where we have the middle section over here, we have the cutout, and we even have a faux pin that's used to secure the real thing in place. Once the fastener protrudes out, again, you get the strength of the fastener, but you also get the proper detailing required for the clamp. As for the hinge itself, that's this section over here. Note, I made it somewhat thick so that it can be as robust as possible. This guy hinges in place, and we have these little rib nails over here that are to be used as the hinge pins. You simply mark the location, snip it off, and then mount the pin in place with a little bit of glue, and then once that's done, you can see how the piece can be hinged. The piece itself is, of course, integrally printed to have its weld beads, so less work that needs to be done, again, by you, the builder. Also, as a quick recap, those top-mounted tow cable mounts have the same type of features that we have here, with also the weld beads integrally printed on. But again, more information on that when the time does come. So, in addition to these straps here, we also have 2 smaller straps. And you want to pay attention because they may look the same and they are similar in size, however, they are indeed different. This one here would be on the bottom rear portion, and I'll go ahead and just throw a picture on screen of one of the real unit in question so you get an idea what I'm talking about. However, just like the other one, it has the same design with the 2 cutouts right over there, and also has the same pivoting eyelet and hinge setup that I just referenced with the larger counterpart. If we compare the 2 side by side, you get to see exactly what I was referring to. So keep this in mind. Again, the 2 look similar, but this one here is slightly larger. And the 2 are not compatible. So if you're assembling these and you see that the one strap is slightly too long or slightly too short, don't do any modification or any cutting or sanding. You have the wrong piece mounted on the wrong body. So that is definitely something to be aware when you're working on one of these sets. Unlike the other ones where you have to drill into the hull and slide the piece in place, that's not utilized for these here. You just simply glue to the side of the vehicle, because remember, the strength is actually coming from the M2.5 fastener that we have here that is going to be sticking out of the tank. So that is the reason why we don't have any protrusions sticking out of the bottom portion of these latches. Continuing on new parts for the Tiger One takes us to the set that we have here, which is a new ECA 1/6 scale Tiger One exhaust puffer cap set. This is another set that I've been wanting to retool for quite some time, as for the longest time I did have a set listed on the ECA catalog, but they were made out of cast resin. Well, in the years that came after those sets were released, I found lots of better reference materials out there, and I was able to take those and design the set that we have here. The set will retire the old school sets that have been on the catalog now for quite some time, and also the old exhaust manifold set will be upgraded by having these parts included with it. As you can see, I've been doing a bit of house cleaning in the last few weeks. And back to the set that we have here. So the set consists of the following components. First, you'll notice that we have 3 puffer caps, which is obviously one more than what's needed on a Tiger One. The reason for the third one is, well, why not? And you have an extra in case, again, a mishap were to happen. As for the parts, they are obviously all exactly the same. So here we have one of the caps over here. Note it has the appropriate geometry with the shape of the dog leg type stem. It has the 2 perforations right here on either side. And also it has the internal detailing over here of the stamped metal cap with the securing rivet right there in the middle. On the outer portion, we have the outer detailing here of the rivet itself. And note the slight convex section of the stamping for the cap. On the hinge, you'll notice it has the appropriate geometry of the piece itself. The real one is actually a steel stamping, so of course the following geometry was brought into this unit here. On this side here, I also included some pegs to be used for hinge pinning. However, realistically, rather than using those ones, I just also supplied some metal rods over here, which are going to be used to cut to length, and then you could use these in place. These are actually better than the printed ones, but since they're on the runner, hey ho, why not? But here you go. Here's the entire set here put on the table. As for how the piece connects, well, the first thing you want to do is deburr this fellow over here. This little protrusion sticking out is just a piece of sprue. So snip that off with a clean cut snip and sand that down with a little bit of sandpaper until you have the look like you see here. Then you just line it up on the hinge. So we'll use this one over here. And when you're lining it up, you want to make sure that you put the pin in the right hole. You notice there's a larger hole and a smaller hole. The smaller hole is for the pin. The larger hole, not so much. As for what the larger hole is for, beats me. It's on the real one, so it's on this one. Now, on the hinge, just like with the other part, we have the larger hole and the smaller hole, and same thing, you want to match the hole's diameter sizes. So you want to, which would be the one in the back, and once you pin it together, this is basically the look that you get. Once it's hinged, the piece will actually be able to function, like you can see, basically right here with my rough animation with my fingers. Continuing with the Tiger One takes us to the parts that we have here. However, unlike the other parts that are all brand new additions to the catalog, this one here has been on the ECA catalog for a little while, but this is the first time I've had the opportunity to bring it onto the table for all of you to enjoy. And this here is the ECA Tiger One rear mud flap frame set. This set here replaced a earlier cast resin set that was on the catalog for a number of years. That set has long since been retired, and this one here has been offered ever since. The rear portion of the Tiger One on the rear plate, most notably on the rear corner areas, are noteworthy because there is this frame that's found on the vehicle that's welded to the vehicle, and this would be where the hinge mechanism for the mud flaps would go, and specifically this is the one for an early production Tiger, and there are differences between the early and the late. The early production Tiger had this box frame. Originally this box frame would have been used and it was carried over from the initial pattern of Tiger One, where the unit would actually be bolted to the rear plate and had no hinges on it, and that's why we have these little sections that we have here. Well, as the vehicle entered into field, the crews quickly realized that the permanently bolted on design was definitely something that could use some improvement, and so a hinge mechanism was later developed. But the one that we have here is the original pattern. The unit has all of the appropriate geometry for this piece, and you may also notice it's also integrally printed to have its weld bead. So again, it's a simple snip off the sprue, mount on the model, and you're good to go. The unit does have the holes for the mounting fasteners for the initial pattern of mud flaps that are also present. So if you are building your tank as an initial, you just basically drill these out further and you can actually bolt on the ECA metal initial production mud flaps to the rear section of the hull. Something else that's noteworthy about the frame is with the provisions that we have over here, as well as this plate. These provisions would be for mounting on the rear NoTech light, and it would actually secure it to these areas. This plate over here is only found on one side, and as you can see, it's already designed to plug directly into the holes that are integrally printed on. You simply snip and lock this piece in place, and you're good to go. Now, it's been a little while since I worked on an initial or an early production Tiger 1, but I believe on one side you get the plate, and on the other side the actual NoTech light would be fastened in this location. Namely, the large square one with the flip-up lens section, like what we see on other German vehicles. That would be found on an initial production Tiger 1, and then later on, as the vehicle progressed, we had the tubular version of the light that would be affixed in this one location. Which, by the way, ECA does make the tubular version of the NoTech light. And while on the topic of fender mounts for the Tiger 1, this takes us to an older item, actually a very old item, that's still on the ECA catalog, that's still in production. And again, since I had the parts on hand before they go out to the customer, I might as well go ahead and bring them onto the table. And that is the set that we have here, which is the initial production Tiger metal rear mud flap set. So here we have the frame section, as I just went over before, and obviously in order to have the frames on the vehicle, these are for the fitting of these rear mud flaps. The mud flaps that we have here are the initial production version of the mud flaps. And like I mentioned in the initial production Tiger 1 video that I did all those years ago, the Tiger 1 had several different variations of mud flaps that were developed throughout its production life. The ones that we have here are known as the initial production pattern. These lasted from the initial production and also made their way to North Africa, where they added a extender plate on this section over here. But on the pieces themselves, these were the ones that were then later replaced with the hinged ones that we see on, like, for instance, the early production Tiger, which would be like Bovington 131, and then later on those would be revised again on the late production variants. That's out of the scope of this video. What is going on here, though, is that here you can see what the original tin work was like for the Tiger 1. Also, like I referenced before, these things here are some of the oldest items still in constant production on the ECA catalog. As for how long these are going to be in production, that remains to be seen. I do want to phase these out eventually. All of the metal work is something that I want to just move away from. If you notice, the very first things I've been retooling and replacing with 3D printed items were the parts made from metal, handmade metal items, and this here is one of them. So here we have the frame. Now, the way the initial works is that it's actually hard bolted directly to the frame via these 6 fastener location holes here. The original ones were not hinged, and that's why they are quite smaller in size compared to the standard mud flap. If you look at the ones, say, on the early production Tiger, the ones that came later, they were much longer, and they had that section that flips up on the side. For the initial production, that's not the case, and they were very simplistic like these ones here. These guys here, like I stated before, are non-functional, and they just literally bolt directly to the frame like you see presently. These large cutouts over here, one of them is actually for clearance of the NoTech light that I mentioned before, and these pieces are left and right hand specific, by the way. You notice with the way the center rigidity strip is, it's off-center because, again, you need this location here to mount on the fasteners. As for the fasteners, they are supplied, which are these small little brass fasteners that we have right here, little miniature hex bolts, and these are to scale to real units. These items here, again, are handmade, so they are made literally with these 2 hands that you see here on video right now. They are cut, bent, shaped, and then everything is soldered together. And the pieces are basically as strong as I can humanly make with this media. Once these things are primed, painted and mounted to the vehicle, they definitely change the look of the vehicle quite immensely. Again, for point of reference, I will remind you of the initial production 1/6 scale Tiger that I built about 10 years ago at this point. I really should build another one, but there's so many other Tigers out there to do. This is a set I've been wanting to produce for many, many years, and finally I got around to actually getting to it. If we can recall, if anyone's a fan of the ECA channel, you'll know that about 10 years ago, I scratch built a Tiger 100 pattern of vehicle in 1/6 scale, and there is a video series found on the channel. Well, in that video series, I mentioned when I got to the bins, how the bins are fabricated. And on that model, I actually went ahead and fabricated all this out of sheet metal. I had to make some templates, cut the metal to shape, bend it, solder it, all that good stuff. Well, it's thanks to that build over there, I was able to go ahead and design these ones here all those years later. And many of the lessons I learned from fabricating those bins obviously went into these sets here. So starting with the sets, of course, they are all 3D printed, and they are printed hollow. As you can see, also everything is a single 3D print. So the entire bin itself is basically good to go from the get-go. The only thing that needs to be added detail-wise to the bin itself are the addition of the support straps. And on the Tiger 100 pattern of bins, they are found in the various locations. We have 2 straps on either side, and another one here on the bottom, which is basically like an L bracket. In order to strap this to the vehicle, you will need to do a little bit of manufacturing with the use of this brass strip. The brass strip is going to be supplied with the sets, however, they're not going to be drilled out, and this is something that needs to be done by the builder because of the hand-fitted nature of the part. The reason why I didn't go ahead and make these out of 3D print is because these pieces should really be made out of metal because of how robust the piece can be in this type of setup. But essentially, basically, what you're going to do is you're going to mark the locations where the fasteners got to go, drill them out, and then you can bend this and shape this to the side of the turret and maybe add another fastener or two in order to secure this thing firmly in place. As for the fasteners, they are currently not seen on the table, but they are included, and there are a bunch of M3 hex bolts. So with the hex bolts all being secured in place, this thing here would be a rock solid install to the side of any Tiger 1 turret of one flavor or another, being an armor tech or a field of armor that's being backdated to an initial. On the front portion here of the bin, you can see these holes over here, and these holes are for mounting of the latches. These are your standard German World War II pattern of bin latch. This is a standalone set also listed on the ECA catalog. It's 3D print. However, this set here comes standard with this unit. Once the unit is assembled, the latch is actually functional and will be able to secure to the lid section here, or at least that's the idea. And if anyone has seen the other videos where I mentioned these latches, there's a little piece of wire that's used to replicate the padlock section that would be found on the real unit, and that's why we have these other 2 holes that are side by side like that. The top one is for the main latch itself, it plugs into here, and these other 2 holes are for the wire to be bent and fit in that location. And as you can see, the holes are also present on this unit over here. So you just line it up, drill them out, and you're good to go. On the top portion, you get to see the hinge mechanism, and this is one improvement compared to the original one that I built all those years ago. On the original one, I basically just use off-the-shelf hinges to go ahead and fabricate that part. However, this here would be more in tune to the real unit. We have just these segmented hinges over here. They are printed hollow, so they're ready for the installation of the wire from the get-go. That's really all there is to mention about the main bin itself, and this brings us to the lid. And the lid is something that is a mixture of both accurate detailing as well as I took a little bit of artistic licensing in some area because, well, frankly, there's no information out there on this piece. However, if I was to take a guess, I'm pretty sure it would have this feature due to several other bins of the same era having similar type of features. So starting with the external portion, here we have the corresponding hinge sections. Again, they are printed through and through. Should come out on camera. And as you can see, it is a perfect fit on this area. Also, the way it overhangs and fits onto the bin body absolutely perfect. And as you can see, the piece does hinge quite nicely. On this area here has the little latch, as well as a little bit of printing sprue, but that was just taken care of right now. The latch is the correct geometry, and note it has the rivet detailing present on this section. The point of the latch is to catch the other latch that flips up and snaps into the section over here and locks it in place, just like we see on the later production bin lids. However, what makes this interesting, in my opinion, is not the outside, but it's the inside. So as I mentioned before, there's not really a whole lot of information out there on the inner portion of these lids. However, it's my guess that the inside portion has this type of setup because of just the need to have rigidity ridges on a piece of metal this large. That's also hinged, no less, to prevent it from warping and bending around. And also we have some kind of a guide over here which would have some kind of a gasket just to keep the contents on the inside nice and dry, as we've seen on other lids of the period. And as for inspiration for this, I actually got this from the Panzer III. The Panzer III and Panzer IV bins were in production, being used at that time, and so it's not exactly too much of a leap to imagine that when they were making these bins here, they went ahead and added similar type features for the same reasons. So, starting with the border itself, this would have been made out of a piece of angle strip that has been crimped and formed to form the inner shape, and that would again seal off the outer and inner contents. And on these three areas over here, we have rigidity braces, which would be made from steel stampings. And as you can see, thanks to this technology over here, the pieces are hollow, just like they are in the real unit, and actually do give the piece a little bit of rigidity. As I showed before, once the piece fits in place, it fits absolutely perfectly, and actually does a pretty good job in keeping everything nice and snug. The other addition of the detailing, besides it having just the extra rigidity, is that it also gives it some nice detailing through and through, so that when you open the piece up, it has something over here going for it, as opposed to being just empty and just being totally naked. Also, needless to say, the set contains not one, but enough components to assemble two of these bins for reasons that should be, again, fairly obvious. And as luck turns out, I actually have the opportunity to go ahead and quickly compare and contrast the saddle type bins with a standard conventional Tiger One rear bustle bin. This component here is another piece that's listed on the ECA catalog. It's been on the catalog for a little while now, and this thing was actually the subject matter of another video many moons ago when I was working on an Armortech early production Tiger One. This unit is actually heading off to a customer, so this is a production piece, and we can actually see the current quality found on the production units. The one thing that I do want to mention is that the material choice has changed from the previous editions, which was made out of an SLS nylon, while this one here is the new current type material, which is the same white resin / nylon material that we've seen on the other parts found on the video, as well as other videos that came out previously. The material is much smoother compared to the other example, which is part of the reason why I opted to switch to this medium. But as you can see, this one here is hollow on the inside, has all the riveting detailing present, and also the hinge detailing present as well. And for good measure, we have the same latch systems that are integrally printed on. The reason why on the initial production bin I left it as a separate part is just in case a mishap were to happen and the piece were to break, it's easier to go ahead and replace it in this format. Just remove one off the sprue, as opposed to the older design, which would require a little bit more work. But hey, as you develop and keep doing things, you get to learn more techniques. Anyway, so here's the original bin. Here go the lid bins right over here. The gasket type feature found on both of them, as well as the remainder of the latch mechanisms. These guys here would just fit into place and get hinged together. Like I said before, this one here is spoken for and it is getting head off to the customer. And as it turns out, I don't just have one of these units currently on hand going out to a customer, but I have a second one right over here. So if you want one, place the order on the ECA catalog, and I'll definitely get the parts into production for you. So with that shameless plug out of the way, let's go ahead and quickly compare and contrast the initial pattern of saddle bin with the standard rear bustle bin. So obviously you have a lot more volume of space in this one compared to this unit over here, but also remember it's not just one, but you get two of these. So I think the internal volume space basically evens out. But this one is probably a little bit easier to get to because it's in one location. You don't have to walk to one side of the turret or the other in order to get access to your stuff. And again, it's always nice to have options available to you, and more options, the better. Either you can roll with a standard bin like this one here, or now you could even roll with the really cool and unique saddle style bins for Tiger 100. As you can see, I have lots of irons in the fire, and I have most certainly been keeping my 3D printer up on his toes. There are a lot of other new items that are currently in research and development now, and they will definitely be making their debut once their time has come. But that's more, of course, a topic for another video for another day. And with that, that wraps up this new product announcement video for the EastCoastArmory.com 1/6 scale Tiger 1 detail parts. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel, where it's a great way to keep up to date on new posted content, being new product announcement videos like this one here, or the other usual type of content being small scale model showcase videos and 1/6 scale project update videos that frequently get posted. Another way to keep in a loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook, where I have more photographs of all the new items that are sneak peeked and released, as well as photographs of the other smaller and larger scale builds that have been seen on this channel in the past. Of course, don't forget to swing by EastCoastArmory.com, where there are more 1/6 scale and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again. I'll be seeing you all again on the next one. See you there.